So it's been a while since I've done any kind of video or any update. I've been just not posting anything on Facebook for a little while, just trying to focus on trying to fix the problem, if I can fix it, on the car with the throttle problem, along with doing some other things I needed to do for a while. So I've been super busy. Probably really the main part of it's been like the last two and a half weeks working on this wiring. I removed the original harness that I made like 13 years ago, splicing together wires from the original 92 with wires from the 2003 truck that it came out of, because that's kind of what I had to do back then. I couldn't afford to like build a whole new harness from scratch. That was in the car for a long time, and all the connectors were old, just using whatever I had. So I pulled it all out, inspected it. I found some things that were a little questionable. Some of the connectors like sitting in one spot for a really long time, kind of bent over, kind of getting flat, and some of the insulation is cracked. Wires are really stiff. Obviously, there's tons of solders in it. I know a lot of people aren't fond of solders. Back then, I thought that was probably a better connection than a crimp. But I guess nowadays, I guess crimps are technically considered better, especially if you use good heat shrink on it. Anyway, so I went over that whole thing. Nothing that was absolute smoking gun on the original harness, except for just being old and everything. I did kind of go over some of the car harness stuff, the original factory plug that goes to the firewall. I've been using it for a long time. I actually kind of went through it a little bit when I built this new car. And but I was trying to just wiggle whatever I could wiggle to see if I get anything to turn any kind of power off, have any kind of problem. I did find one pin in there that if I wiggled it, had the OBD2 on with the foot on the throttle, and I would lose OBD2 connection. And I also noticed a dome light would flicker on that wire. Now, I couldn't really connect together how that would particularly affect the throttle problem, because I don't think it was on the same circuit as that power source was. But maybe I'm not seeing something that could have been. So on that, so for a long time I've been running all my wires through that plug all the way to the front of the car, connecting to a fuse block, which then runs all the way to the back of the car where the battery is. And I realized, well, I'm running a lot of wire, for no reason. So basically I just disconnect all those wires from the firewall plug that power the fuse block, the ignition power, all that kind of stuff. Rerouted them to the back of the car, and I put two new fuse blocks back there. One of them is a hot fuse block, the other one is a switched ignition fuse block. So I run a relay on that one to get switched ignition. So eliminating that failure point of the firewall, running everything directly back to the battery inside the car, out of the elements. So I did that. That was one of the first things I did. And then along with that is when I started inspecting, the rest of the harness, all that kind of stuff. And so I decided, I was like, you know what, I can't, with a right mind, put this harness back in the car the way it is, even though I couldn't find anything specifically wrong with it. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I found a company, lswiring.com, that has pigtails. You can get pretty much whatever length you want. So you can buy a pigtail for the speedometer output, the whole length you need to go all the way to the computer. So I did that with every single sensor, fuel injector, coil, everything. So everything is a solid wire from its connection point all the way to the computer. The only places that there's any kind of breaks is the fuel injectors, all the fuel injectors and the coils and the O2 sensors all get powered sources, and so they do splice together. All the coils splice 2 to 1, 2-to-1 again, and then I spliced in the coil to that one, and then it goes to another wire, steadily getting to a bigger wire, and it goes through the firewall, through a new plug in the firewall, then use the OE plug. It's a Canon plug now, and then it runs to the back of the car to that fuse block. Has each bank has its own dedicated fuse. Each ignition source off the computer and the throttle actuator controller have their own dedicated fuse. So that filled up one whole fuse block. So those are the only places there's any kind of crimps or anything on any of the wires. I also ran each set of wires individually and twisted, paired, or triple or quad, whatever they were. I twisted every single set of wires individually, so they're their own single wire, twisted individually, and I used 3-to-1 heat shrink with adhesive liner on the inside. So each wire is completely heat shrink from one end of the connector all the way to the other end of the connector, no breaks in it at all, and twisted to help with whatever kind of noise or anything like that could potentially happen. And it helps with serviceability, being each wire is individual. If anything happens to any one of those wires, I can just pull that one whole section of wire out because it's its own wire. It makes it a little more bulky that way, but for serviceability, I'll show it to you here in a minute. I felt like it was just the way to go without having everything all in one giant bundle, especially using 3-to-1 adhesive lined heat shrink. If I put them all in one bundle, eventually all to one bundle, then it'd be really difficult to get inside that bundle because of the heat shrink. So I thought that was going to be the better route on that. So yeah, going to the firewall, I did not use the firewall plug. I got two Deutsch Canon plugs, made a plate to feed them through the firewall, so they're completely sealed. Has enough plugs in there, pins in there for all the power wires and all the signal wires, like tack wire, just multiple things that go through those plugs, along with one of them is completely dedicated to all the wipers, lights, all that type of stuff runs through the other plug. And I got a little bit of room in there if I needed to add anything I could. So I did that. I'm trying to think. I removed those power wires that run into the front, and so those are eliminated, and I heat shrinked all the wires for the fans that go to this side of the engine bay. So I did that. I also rerouted the fan wire to this fuse block. It was going to the starter with no fuse on it, so now it's got a fuse on it. I also rerouted all the grounds to the right lower side of the block, and they were a little easier access than being on the back of the cylinder head, and just nothing going on in that area to where anything could happen to them. It's just easy to get to. So anyway, so it's got better grounds. I also did the grounds from the computer the same way. Like there's several grounds that run out of the computer. It's actually quite surprising. So I ran 2-to-1, 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 and so on, until they all ran down to the ground, and then added in like the coil grounds, the fan ground, things like that, the HVAC fan ground, things like that to there. Just so it's a little more simplified. Also use the bosses where the old air conditioning would sit and put two studs in those holes. So they're not even bolts, they're actual studs. So I can add plenty of stuff to it. And it gives me two different locations to add grounds to. Trying to think of what else. I think that's about everything, talking about everything. So I'll just run through everything as best I can on the car. So here's my basic fuse area, power area that everything was run to before. So these are fans. This is HVAC fan. This is the hot for the computer, alternator, starter. This is the main power wire coming from the back of the car. I know this looks a little rough down here. I still got to clean this up. I just did a test drive today, so it looks a little rough. So these right here are all the twisted pair wires. You can see how all of them are twisted pairs. They're all separated into their own individual bundles. These are all signal wires. The majority of these are all signal wires. Majority of these are all like coil, injector, that type of stuff. These wires run to the cannon plug in the kick panel, and they're like throttle actuator control, some power sources, different things like that. So ran them all around. I made these brackets for the 8L clamps to support them, and then did little tie wrap splits in them. So they run all the way around, and then they go to the back of the engine and split off to their respective places. So you can kind of see all the coil wires in here, everything wrapped nice. And then on this side, we've got these are those two cannon plugs I was talking about. So I made a plate and panel bonded this panel to it, so they're actually screwed in from the back side, and these plugs come off on this side, so it's fully removable from there. These are actually obviously the fan wires for the input and output. These are for the fan switches from the inside of the car, the manual switches, and then these are all the coils and stuff like that that run down. You can see they run across the back there. I know this wiring doesn't look great. I'm gonna eventually work on that fan and light wiring in there. It's not the best. So there's all that. So let me get a light. So here are those two fuse blocks I was talking about. So the one on the left is the switched one, the one on the right is the hot one, and then the relay is right above it there for the switched one. So it runs a switched source from the inside, and then it gets its power directly from the battery to that fuse block down there, and that one's directly hot from the battery. And then this side, that's been the same. That's the fuel pump, fuse and relay there. That's all basically the same. And I'm trying to think of anything else that's different. I think everything in here is basically the same. Most of the stuff you can't see because it's hidden underneath and everything. A shot of the battery area. But I'm pretty proud of this wiring. I mean, it was a complete cluster trying to do a continuous run of heat shrink from one end of these wires all the way to the other. It wasn't until the end I realized that instead of shoving the wire through, I should have run a piece of safety wire through it and then pulled the wire through. I found that out at the end. That was like a game changer there. Anyway, I did a test drive today and everything went really well. It seems like it's running maybe a little smoother at speed. I'm not sure if that's something with the wiring, being a little bit cleaner and consistent and everything. The other thing I did was I had sent my rear end out to a guy and had him redo my gears because I did that years ago, and I always felt like maybe I didn't get it quite right. So he redid the lash, the pinion, backlash, and everything else in the gears, and so the gears are a lot quieter now than they were before. For whatever reason, I'm not sure if it was the gears or what, but the vibration way better now than it was before. So I don't know whether it was I mean, the gears are really the biggest thing that changed as far as anything to do with the vibration. So I drove it up to like 80 miles an hour. It's still a little bit, but nothing like it was before. So I'm pretty happy with how that's going. Um, so trying to think anything else that changed on the car. I think that's about it. I mean, it was a lot of work doing all that wiring. Had some mistakes. There's some wires that were put in the wrong spot here and there. Had some problems last night that uh, a friend Ken was helping me figure out. So we got that all straight. Some just little things. Some of it was just clerical errors on my point. I made a sheet, uh, Excel sheet that has all the pins, all the wires and where they're going through Canon plugs to the computer, just every little section that they go through, just for documentation purposes for me, and for anything happens and I have to get rid of the car or whatever, it's stuff that can go with the car and people will know exactly where all these wires go, because otherwise somebody would be completely lost, because everything's completely different than it was original. So I'm still working through that. I still got to do the new firewall Canon plugs. I got to do documentation on that. But beyond that, it should be good to go. So hopefully, I mean, it's hard to know whether or not the problem is completely fixed or not until I go to an event, because obviously I can't duplicate it locally. I've tried everything I can do to try and duplicate it and just can't. So we found an event in Savannah. So friend Ken is going to go with me to Savannah. He's going to trail the tires and help with tools and get the car ready. And we'll see. It's a little different venue than Charlotte, so it's a little slower speed. So we'll see if it will duplicate down there. Hopefully it doesn't duplicate and we just have a good day and I can finally get to really driving the car and learning kind of what this thing wants to do. And that just only have one day of actually having it drive reasonably well and not have throttle problems. So I really hadn't had a chance to start tuning on it. I did put a bigger rear sway bar in it because it was a little tight. I adjusted some of that with the shocks, but thinking going from a 19 to a 21 might help some of that tightness and everything. So anyway, so we'll see what happens this weekend. So hopefully no issues, and it's good to go. So I'm going to post some pictures eventually of a lot of stuff. I didn't take quite as many pictures as I normally would, but I have some of the process. So it'll be a pretty big photo dump on that. And anyway, anybody that's watching, I appreciate it. And keep our fingers crossed. Maybe this thing is finally fixed. So thanks for watching. Bye.